I am very honored for you to attending my little talk about how to come up with creative strategies for a dynamic remote development team. So this is me, and been working for quite some time in the Dutch games industry, and I've done almost everything that you can do in the Netherlands in games except AAA. And so I'm a lecturer, I'm a researcher, a game designer, narrative designer, owner of a game company, a 2D artist, and also a creative consultant. I'm going to focus on, let's say, the purple things for today. And so I've been working on a wide variety of games in my career. And I started off as making interactive art installations, then moved on to interactives for museums, then educational games for primary school, and then went into consultancy, change management within banks and other big businesses. And then I finally managed to do the project that I always wanted to do, where actually, when I was studying what it was all about, was actually making an actual game, commercially entertainment game. And that is Unexplored 2. In all that career and with all the experiences, one of the things that I found very important for my, let's say, own gratification, but also I saw that I could give a lot back, and that's why I decided to also, at the same time, lecture at, in this case, 2 universities, one in Amsterdam and in Utrecht, and my interest is about how to design games with artistic qualities. So, in contrast with, let's say, the speakers that have been here today, I am much more on to what it means for you as a game designer to artistically express yourself, to create interesting cultural experiences from your point of view about your life and how you can share them with others. And then by extension, you see game design as a form of an artistic practice. How do you get your inspiration? How do you cultivate and learn about the world? Use that in your practice of creating cool, meaningful games. And then the money part comes also into play, because that's also quite difficult. How can you do this in a responsible way that you can have a long career in the games industry? So with this lens, I've sort of concocted this little presentation about how you can do this, how you can actually be able to be your sort of creative artistic self, working together with people who come from all kinds of backgrounds, and trying to come up with the coolest thing that you can come up with. So let me take you back to January 22nd, 5 months before we launched Unexplored 2. You have to think that in this phase of development, we were almost there, and I was pulling in the latest build from our repository, and to my sort of surprise, things were working. For the first time, all the stuff that we put into it for almost 5 years, the big ideas, finally came together. And so the things began to click. And finally we saw that we could actually go into the next step, where we could actually go deep. We were finally done with exploring what the game could be, and now we knew what the game was, and now we could deepen it, making it more engaging and more immersive. And finally, we saw how we could leverage the hard work that the team did, and that's something that we haven't seen before. So I'm going to sort of give you advice, or let's say my insights, share my insights on how we as a team did that, accomplished this creative feat. And in using Unexplored 2 as a good example of this. So what is Unexplored 2 then? Okay. This is the moment that the video should start. Unexplored 2 is a procedurally generated open world RPG. Everything that you've seen in the trailer, it's fully procedurally generated. So no game world is the same. How things are connected is never the same. The quests, the characters, all these things are being generated each time when you create a new world. Also, player actions do have impact on the game world. The game world is not static but dynamic. So if you kill off a bunch of monsters on a certain spot, they are gone. But if you keep them there, they will cause trouble in the future. So another part is that the game uses a legacy mechanic. So you have permadeath. Your character, if he dies, then a new generation, a new character will take their place and will inherit some of its the cool stuff, some skills, and you build that up. Then, to get stronger, you have to explore the world. You have to figure out where the secrets are, where the keys are to open ancient closed doors of temples, and you have to figure out how to get to special places. There's also a survival mechanic in there, where you have to deal with the hardships of an environment. You have to deal with the harsh, unrelenting sun of the desert to the wet marshes, where you get cold quickly because it's so wet and cold. There's resource management. You have to collect items to help you in survival, to help you in battle. You can lose them if you are not careful. And then there's this tactical combat where you have to fight monsters using all the tools and all the knowledge that you have to defeat powerful foes. So all of this has been made by these people. We have a core team of 5 individuals from a whole variety of backgrounds. And then we are supported by another team of talented people who supported us in certain phases of our project. Just to give you an idea of what kind of team we're dealing with. So Joris Doormans, he's an expert in procedural content generation. He has a PhD where he, his research topic was about that, and has written a book about it together with Ernest Adams about game design. And he's a professor at the University of Leiden. Then you have Hendrik Visser. He was the sole 2D and 3D artist. He made all the visual content for the game on his own. And he has a background in designing for amusement parks, and has been working on matte paintings for movies. And now, within this project, he used all his talent to create this wonderful, vibrant world. Matthijs Dieriks, he was a journalist, a game journalist. He was the initiator of Control, which is a magazine for the Dutch game industry, and he pivoted to sound and music design and composition, and did the PR and marketing for us. Well, then there's me, and I've already told about you who I am, and then finally Rosa Korsis, who is a programmer and did the UI design. So a whole diverse a group of people working together to create this immense cathedral. And we were not together. We were working on this at home in these different places. So this is the map of the Netherlands. And you can see where the core team lived, which are the pink dots, and the other dots where the support team lived. And for scale, you see that white little bar there, that's 50 kilometers. So this gives you an impression how not big the Netherlands is, and yet it is we lived far enough from each other to say we were working remotely. To give you an idea on how we worked on this, we have here a sort of I have made a little breakdown about how much time we could work on it work on the project. So, for example, Joris, he could work on the project 5 days a week. And I could only work 3 days a week because I'm also a lecturer and a researcher, so I had to also combine that together. And you can see so that everybody has were differently committed to the project, and also meant that we, time-wise, we were working on it on, let's say, different moments. So, and we had to somehow, keep everything together. Here you can see how we try to sort of spend that time. And you can see what kind of phases we are. So everything began in 2017, where there's the ideation phase, where we were, throwing stuff against the wall, see what worked, trying to figure out what kind of game we wanted to make, and how we could make it, making proof of concepts. And then halfway 2018, we transformed those things into prototypes. And you have to imagine that the way we worked, how development worked, was sort of a 360 degrees of development. So if we sort of try to make a sort of the simplest expression of what we came up with, and if it was good enough, we left it there and moved on to the next thing. So, for example, we thought about a way to do combat, then we had combat. Then we wanted to do traversal on the map, and we did a version 2 of that. And so we touched each thing, and then after a while we came back, and usually it was after half a year or maybe more, to combat again, where we could see it. We were sort of like, okay, combat sucks, how can we improve this? And you can see with each step, things changed and the team grew, which is logical. But you can see here in the yellow parts, that's where all the support team actually came into play. And just to give you sort of an impression of, this sort of this, let's say, dynamic situation that we were in. The development reality is then, you are sitting at home, and in my case, in the attic, so this is my workspace, where you're sitting there for 8 hours a day, and then, and we only had to contact each other, we only had Discord. And we had 1 or 2 meetings per week, and everybody had their own creative process. And so we had to sort of figure out how to make sure that everybody could do whatever they needed to do. But there were, of course, we were connected to one another. So each work that we did, the product that we made, had impact on someone else's process. So the connections, the channels that we used were very narrow. We talked quite briefly, and it was quite, let's say, more focused on the work, but not about, let's say, where were you at in your mind, right? So the challenge that you were facing, the insecurities that you were having about the design, about your own capabilities within the process, there was not much room to really talk about that. So you needed to be self-reliant. You needed to be self-guiding. And you had to deal with all these unknowns. and you have to also deal with the fact that you're working on something that maybe was unfinished or an unclear goal, or a product that was, let's say, maybe less than ideal. So now we can come to the sort of the problem then. How can you again keep yourself motivated when all this this work feels you feel like you're the only one who is bearing that load, and how do you know you're doing the right thing? And how can you then be creative, keep creating when you see all these problems, and you feel like these problems are very difficult to solve? And then, of course, how can you help yourself? But then you have to also help each other, the other teammates. How do you do that then? So, so from this point on, hopefully I can sort of answer that question, or these questions. One of the things that what was happening during development was that everybody was sort of unsure, especially in the beginning, about how good everybody was. Matthijs was sort of this was his first real big project, and Hendrik has not worked on the project of this scope before, and the work that we saw was so big, and we were sort of looking at each other for like, okay, where do we begin? What was the game going to be about? And that was really difficult to sort of articulate what we wanted to see in the game, and then on the other hand, it was also how do we keep room for each other to fill that in, and who would decide anything? And we kept looking at the lead, which was Joris, and Joris was keep looking at us. It's like, I don't know, you're the artist, tell me what you want. So this was quite awkward. And over time, we begin to, when we were sort of working on things, and we just said, no, if no one's going to decide what's going to be, then we're going to do the work ourselves and then figure it out from there. We began to trust each other's expertise, because we were showing stuff that was beginning to look like something really cool. And also what we did was not telling you how to do it. And we began to learn also that it's better to show what you've been making, and then from there talk about it, instead of opening up a whole sort of creative process where you're sort of blue skying everything, and you're spending 3 hours in Discord with no actual tangible results. And also through, let's say, very harrowing calls, we learned that being super critical, and we're Dutch, and we are sort of used to be confrontational, really sucks. And it's, I mean, we know that it comes from a good heart, but it is, it eats away at your morale. And so we began to sort of develop a way of communication where it's much more kinder and which much more positive, and saying more, yes, and can we also do this? Yes, and can you think about this? And what also became a very important part is that we, when you were happy that you made something cool, come up with something cool, then we were also happy. So we shared in the joy that you were having when you made things. And with all these elements, we began to create sort of this, this creative, accepting process where we were sort of riffing off on one another. What also happened in this process is when we were sort of, and this was sort of midway, we began to also give responsibilities to each team member about getting certain things done. And this was not only about things that were in your own expertise or in your field, but also just things that needed to get done, like contacting the publisher, getting figuring out how we could do the translation, localization stuff, setting up a website. All these things were, let's say, busy work and needs to be done, and we gave those responsibilities to everybody else, but also work that needs to be coordinated. So not something that you should be doing, but also was a bigger job than one person could do. So you had to sort of reach out to another team member to ask them to help you out with something. And so what happened then was that this created sort of these small sub-teams, 1 or 2 people together, brainstorming, okay, how can we do this? What needs to be done? How can I help you, support you? And then within that, let's say, small sub-team, also quickly critiquing the work. So, okay, is this good enough? No, it's not good enough. Okay, we need to do something else. And you were very mobile within that week, because you have to imagine that we did sprints of 1 week, usually. That's not totally true. It's not a sprint of 1 week. We did cycles of 1 week and sprints of 2 months. I have to. Doing work in 1 week without really contacting each other can be very. Time passes by quickly. So the point of doing this is that you could sort of leverage, let's say, the collective work by being responsible and getting people on board. You can actually achieve a lot in that 1 week, more than you could do when you're on your own. In Star Trek, the legendary science fiction TV series and other things, the Vulcans have this philosophy which is called infinite diversity and infinite combinations. Vulcans, for those who don't know, there are aliens there. They're very logical, and they saw that their philosophy that you have to embrace diversity, and this is also what happens. So when working in small teams, collaborating with the artist, with the one who's doing the writing, the programmer, you begin to learn about each other's profession, about the things that they're thinking about, and you can come up with really cool and interesting things that you could not come up with yourself. And we try to make sure that everybody was in contact at some point in the process with someone else, so that they could get sort of their perspective on the project, and that made the work easier to discuss, and then it was easier also to adapt, to improve that work that fits, let's say, also someone else's process. And we learned this whole thing, and then now we sort of double back to my the 2022 5 months before launch. We learned that when we were there to flow with one another, to sort of feel the rhythm of each other's work, and we could easily give responsibilities to someone, and we knew that that good work came back, and we could work very quickly from that point on. When we feel supported by the team, but also by the project itself, we were soaring. And in my case, I could finally do the actual deep work for the narrative design. So I could write the dialogue, the item descriptions, I could write in the deep lore. And people could sort of react on that. So they saw things happening. And so I had an intern at that point, and we shared, let's say, the authorship. So she came up with something, and I was, oh, that's a cool idea, let's move on with this. Then the programmer came up with an idea that sort of we could fit it in. And it makes it much easier when you have that ground, sort of this creative fundament, that we could build something that was sort of a collective work. And it was not about sort of the specs per se, so it's not what it should be, but we were sort of looking for how to make it better. So if whatever the outcome was didn't fit the spec, was it then really bad, or did we find something better? And then we made it fit. regardless. Um, and we kept on iterating. So with this process, it's super important that you keep iterating on the product, so that you can make incremental changes, that you're not afraid to make mistakes, because if you have a mistake, the mistake is not so big, then you can sort of change it, adapt it, make it more, improve upon it. And finally, one of the things that was happening late in the process, so around launch and after up to this point, we stepped out of our own sort of comfort zone of development and reached out to the community, to the world at large. So we contacted our player base who were with us from our early access and the alpha test and the beta test and all that kind of stuff. And we began to sort of feel comfortable sharing unfinished product, getting feedback, reacting with the feedback, engaging with players about the stuff that they experienced. And we began to see what kind of impact the work that we did had on them, and how cool the community was, how appreciative they were, how some people were, even with, let's say we had an early access build, already were spending hundreds of hours in this unfinished game and living adventures there, which we couldn't imagine. And which made it so doing this not only made us feel that we were making something with impact, but also helped us understanding that market that we're stepping into to a certain extent, and also feel comfortable about talking about it. And because we were very careful in how we talked to them, and we were I guess developed this tone of voice where we were very appreciative and respectful to our players, even though when they were very critical and even almost aggressive. And then we say, well, that's fine. I understand what you're coming from. How can you? What can you tell us that we can make that problem go away or help you enjoy the game better that way? And so this created this connectiveness with, let's say, the work towards other people. But the last thing that we also did was that we applied for the Dutch Game Awards. And here you see a picture of us in the row. So it begins with the girl with the blue hair, and then so to the right, where we won 2 Dutch Game Awards, where we finally felt that we were appreciated by the industry itself, which was really cool to share that experience on that night. So, if you want to work remotely and you want to make it successful and vibrant and make it the best process that you can be, try to develop a collaborative culture and based on a common understanding and kindness. Ask questions instead of assuming that this is the case, instead of judging. Discuss what has been made and how to make it better. And rely and trust on each individual's expertise and respect each other's expertise. Work on what can be made now, so the low-hanging fruit, and embrace how each contribution enhances an outcome. Cross-connect those responsibilities to keep people in touch and connect to the project, and connect and share and celebrate the work. You can find Underscore 2 on Steam. You can contact me on this email address. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. So first and foremost, awesome stuff. Loved the visuals and everything that you guys have done. We work with a remotely located team as well, spread across the world, and similar size as well as yours that you worked on. I had one question about the stuff that you were talking about. So when you get together and have these meetings, typically somebody might have done a certain amount of work through the week, right? So there's a lot to show, or there's a lot to talk about. You mentioned show the work instead of talking about it. Is that restricted to a certain part of the process that you showed earlier on? And does it work across the board on all processes? Where have you found the best success, most success in all of those processes that you have? And if any other advice around that?
Um, I would say this advice goes for all phases of the project, but it kind of you have to sort of make sure that you scale it in terms of what kind of product has been produced. So if you're talking about, so let's say we'll talk about let's say the latter half of the project, where we had a let's say quite a substantial amount of game already there. The way we did it was we expected everybody to pull the game and actually play the build that was there at the end of the week, so that we can discuss things on Monday, where Joris would give an overview of the things that happened, like this happened, but then you understood how that exactly fit into the game because you played the game. And when people did that, we had the most fruitful discussions, and when people didn't do that, we wasted a lot of time. And that's let's say the most difficult sort of example. Easier examples are things like in the beginning of the project, where we were still figuring out the backstory of the game, the lore, and I was coming up with stuff that was quite what I thought was quite controversial, because up to that point we used fantasy tropes to sort of placeholder all the elements of the game. So we used sort of the Lord of the Rings narrative as sort of saying, okay, this is what the game quest is going to be. You have a thing, and the thing is cursed because something is sort of watching out for it, and you have to throw it into into a place. You go to a place and throw it into something to destroy it. And we used that sort of so with our thinking and our talking about the game was all about sort of using Lord of the Rings as a sort of analogy. But the more we talked about it, the more it became Lord of the Rings, right? And the expectation of, well, shouldn't we have something with elves or orcs or? Me and our artists were like, no, we don't want that. We want our own game world. We want our authentic looking, cool looking thing. So with him, I was sort of discussing about the game, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to prepare a presentation, and I'm just going to put it out there to make the game. Not make the game. To suggest, okay, this is the lore. These are the sort of the main principles. We have these elder sort of gods, but they are not really gods. They're sort of emissaries of the creator of the world, and they are sort of teachers who taught different cultures to behave like this and this and this, and they have kind of purposes. But they're fucked up. They're sort of they're corrupted, and everything is going to shit. And well, I just gave the presentation, hoping and trusting that they would find it okay. And to my surprise, they were like, "Oh, this makes sense," and it becomes much more interesting because I sort of mapped the lore onto what the game was on the strengths of the game, and it began to sort of resonate, and that worked. And instead of another way, what we used to do was to sort of do an open brainstorm session about what the game could be. So like, yeah, we get something like this and something about that, something with elves, something with orcs, and everybody was sort of unsatisfied, right? But now, when I prepared the presentation and and showed that I really thought about this, people were also taking it more seriously, and they were thinking, no, I could see this work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. What I'm asking is, what about stuff like content, right? Like, somebody might be working on dialogues, and so it might not be integrated into the game yet. So
Yeah.
how do you show that? Do you just show like a Excel sheet or something?
We usually showed this in context. So either in the game itself, and people were sort of like, okay, go here to this place, and we have now added the content in there, and then just give feedback. And if nobody sort of would really react, then it was good enough, and then we moved on. Because you saw how many people were working on it, which is not much. So we had no time to second guess. So we had to trust, okay, this is good enough for now. And if it really sucks, then we just go back to it and improve on it. Anyone else?
Hi, thank you for your informative session today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so I work in a, I'm a part of a publisher, and we are working with we are a Japanese publisher working with a Indian developer, which is based in one place in India, but they have like smaller teams scattered across the country. Um, and so even in that one place in India, like it's Pune, but nobody like everybody comes from a different place, like all over India, and so like sometimes the cultural differences between Japan and India, and also like different parts of India, are like so much. And like for example, you talked about allow some freedom to the you know to each member's way of working as long as it's productive, but so like we can like check all the check boxes and still there would be some dispute or discord among the team members, among the development team, and also like between us and the development team, like for those like cultural differences, or simply maybe one of the team members is widely disliked by his like his other team members, despite of contributing a lot to the product. And so I found it really difficult to kind of maintain a harmony among the team members. Like, um, do you prioritize the harmony or the product? Like that has always been
Well, I don't
my
know if I
source of
can.
headaches.
Okay, I think I understand your question. I'm not sure if I can answer, but let me give let me provide you an anecdote and see where we end up. So I had a sort of a conflict with Matthijs, with our audio guy, in the very early stage of the project, where and the way I sort of as I said before, in the Netherlands we are used to be very direct in our feedback, but there's direct and there is how can you put this, confrontational. And if you sort of know me a little, I can be quite confrontational. So and also I tend to exaggerate with my reactions and emotions and all that kind of stuff. So when I said something wrong to, and so and there was one discussion about sort of, okay, how are you planning to involve us in the in the sort of the audio and musical design? What are your thoughts about what kind of, let's say, atmosphere you want to create? Well, et cetera, et cetera. And then I made a sort of a remark which he took offense, and not at the moment, but later on, which he was very, very angry because he thought that I was basically dissing him, but that was not the point at all. So and I think basically it sort of disrupted the relationship from then on. So how we solved this was sort of, okay, I asked asked Hendrik, the artist, to say, well, can you then sort of collaborate with Matthijs to make sure that what we came up with would be there, and I will just step out and I will just keep a professional distance, and then let him be and work around it, so to speak. And so you sort of switched roles or switched responsibilities. And that was a way to solve this problem where our personal dispute would not interfere with the actual work that we're doing. And still respecting, let's say, the professional as such. Okay, so the work is good. And I was like, okay, cool, this sounds really cool. And not make it personal. But that, of course, requires quite, let's say, people who are emotionally mature, of course, to be able to separate that. And this is something that you have to foster, cultivate. You have to have a team that actually understands this and can help out, and who are not afraid also to deal with the pain, because it is painful, and I'm really, really deeply sad about the fact that it happened, and it has never been repaired. So, but it's how it is. So if you're a professional, and so this is the balance, right, between the personal and professional, is that the personal should not interfere with the professional. So in the end, you talk about the work, and you're not talking about the person. Does that sort of answer your question? Sorry, what did you? No, not. Well, okay, so that's not really true. Yes, we did. There was one person who was not functioning, let's say, reliably anymore, and so we decided to end his contract. But we just let him go. So like, okay, and he understood why, and because he was not in a good place, and he also felt that he was not performing well. So we ended the collaboration sort of on friendly terms.